What's up? What's up? What's up, everyone? How's it going? Zach coming at us from Moab.
Yeah. You guys will notice I'm not in the typical Vanguard studio, but yeah, super excited for this momentous, dare I say, legendary interview that is about to unfold. No secret, this has been one that Gavin and I have been super stoked to do for fucking years now. Basically, since we started the show, this was the mountain we were looking to climb, basically.
Yeah, both of us are longtime listeners of Secular Talk. Kyle's commentary has definitely been important in shaping the way we view politics. So we're really excited to chat with Kyle. Huge shout out to Kyle for taking the time on the 4th of July, no less, to chat with us fucking morons. So, really excited to hear from him. Really excited to pick his brain a little bit. And I guess without further ado, don't want to keep the man waiting. Welcome to the Vanguard, Mr. Kyle Kulinski. How's it going?
It's going well, guys. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. And it's funny because I thought I was the one being an asshole when I was like, yeah, I could do it on Monday. And you were like, oh, that's the 4th of July. And I was like, I'm not doing shit else, so I can do it. So I felt like I was being an asshole because it's almost like I'm making you guys do it on the 4th of July. You know what I'm saying? So I felt a prick about that.
No, we were extremely excited, as you could probably tell, man. Look, you're a huge trailblazer in this entire field. There's no secret there would be no shows like the Vanguard if there weren't shows like Secular Talk. So it's a huge honor for us to, see, I'm already fumbling and fucking up my words. This is going to be a good show, guys.
My show is sexual. My show is very sexual. I've been told many times.
Well, speaking of 4th of July, Kyle, you said you weren't doing shit today. Is that actually true? You're just not even doing anything for the 4th of July? Not feeling very patriotic?
Yeah, so I did my show. I said happy 4th at the beginning of it. I guess that counts for something, but yeah, that's pretty much it. I actually, I may have, you guys might be getting some breaking news here, but I may have a touch of the Rona. I may have COVID. Yeah. Crystal tested positive, and let's just say if I don't get it, it would be a miracle,
Oh no.
So
have you had COVID before?
No, there were a couple times I thought I did, but I didn't. And this, honestly, I should already have it, and I don't really have many symptoms. I mean, I guess I had a little bit of a dry cough last night, but that was pretty much it. So yeah, I don't know. Because I was supposed to, Wednesday night is when I had, my first exposure to it. And then I think, we didn't know she was positive until, what was it? Friday or Saturday or something like that. But she was showing symptoms, and we were acting like she wasn't. And then, so if I don't get COVID, let me tell you something, those vaccines are phenomenal because I should be swimming in it at the moment. But yeah. I mean, I'm okay for now, but apparently everybody's got it right now. It's kind of weird. Friends of mine have been reaching out to me and saying they have it. And I'm like, Jesus, everybody let their guard down a little bit. And then boom, everybody gets hit with it.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is that I feel like I've probably had it at least once, but I also wasn't very symptomatic. So it's possible that you will have it, but you won't, experience any real symptoms, and you'll just kind of feel shitty, but it won't ever actually turn into a real serious thing. So, that's what I would hope for.
Yeah. I mean, I've been testing negative. I've been testing ever since we, realized like, oh, I'm almost certainly going to get it. I keep testing negative. It's weird. My sister too. My sister was exposed to it and she kept testing negative. My mom has never gotten it this entire time. And now we're starting
I've never gotten it either. I don't know what it is, but I mean, I don't want to say I've been the most careful person. Either is Gavin. I mean, we both go out and do shit. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm like sort of middle of the road in terms of how cautious I am. I mean, if I'm supposed to wear a mask, I will, but if I'm not supposed to, I won't, you know what I mean? So I don't know. I was part of the vaxxed and relaxed segment where once I got the vaccine, I was like, nah, I'm good. I'll be good. But apparently I read recently that it only lasts like 4 months. And now I'm going on, I think I got my booster in December. So I'm on like 6 months. So I should get COVID, but I don't know. If I do get it, hopefully it's moderate and hopefully I just don't get it. We'll see.
Yeah. Fair enough. Well, I guess we can start with one question that I've had for you for a while, Kyle. I think a lot of people might have had this question too, which is that in the post-Bernie era, it definitely seems like a lot of channels and a lot of, commentators that were kind of part of the Bernie movement have gone one way or the other way. There's definitely a bit of a factionalization that's occurred in the wake of what used to be a pretty united space, at least from what I can remember. There was obviously always little divisions and the such, but seemed like it was a little bit more united. Some people have noted that your channel has, failed to grow as much as others in the post-Bernie era. What would you attribute that to? And also, just wondering too, why you haven't started streaming anything.
Yeah, so the streaming one, that's a separate question. Basically, the answer on that is just time restrictions, because I'm always going back and forth from New York to DC to Virginia, and basically I don't really have much free time as it is, and so it's my schedule is sort of packed in such a way where I get everything out however I can to like maximize people watching it and views and stuff like that. So I mean, I've been meaning to do streaming, but I just haven't found a time where I could like consistently do it. So I just sort of was like, I guess I just won't do it because I don't want to do a stream once every 4 months or whatever. Seems weird. So, and the YouTube guys tell me like premiering is basically streaming without streaming, kind of. So the algorithm is supposed to treat it the same way. So I premiere like the first video every day now, and that's supposed to count as streaming. I will say though, you guys are right that it is probably true, and this is what YouTube has told me also, that like if I were to stream, that might lead to more channel growth.
Yes.
Which would be wonderful. I mean, I'd love if that was the case. But like I said, I just haven't had time with my schedule to work it in consistently.
Yeah.
As far as the lack of growth on my channel, I mean, yeah, look, it drives me crazy, drives me crazy because I feel like I'm doing a good show, dedicating just as much time as I ever have to it, just as much care into it as I've ever had. You guys know I refuse to. I'm not going to like follow a crowd or take a position because I think it'll get me more of a response or whatever. So all I can really do is just say exactly what I think in the format that I've laid out and just do the best I can. And so I've done that, and I've effectively hit a brick wall in terms of growth. And look, part of it is the answer you guys hear me give all the time, which is the algorithm, which is there's an 88% drop in new sub growth after the 2020 election. And because I've been around for previous elections, like if you were to tell me, Kyle, there's going to be a 30% drop in sub growth, it's like, okay, that's the way it works. That's what happened last time in the last election. But you tell me nearly a 90% drop in growth. That's not just organic, like, oh, just people just aren't interested in your stuff or you're doing a bad job. No, that's like you hit a wall because YouTube created the algorithm in such a way where you were going to hit a wall. In fact, David Dole was tweeting about this earlier today. I think it was a great point. For the past like month or two, he somehow snuck under the radar and the algorithm was treating him fairly. And when he did that, suddenly all of his videos were like 200,000 views, 300,000 views. And he has phenomenal thumbs. He has phenomenal titles. He covers good topics, but he was popping like 200,000, 300,000 views per video. And then he showed a comparison between that month or 2 month stretch versus today. He was getting like 62% of his views were from non-subscribers. And then now today it dropped to like 50% or something like that. And just that 11% difference made the difference between a video getting 200,000 views and a video getting like 50,000 views or 60,000 views. So, and I noticed this too. Here's a crazy, I've never told this story before either. So you guys are getting a little bit of an exclusive on this one. There was one time where the algorithm for whatever reason was sort of like glitching out or some shit. And I had a video that I did, I want to say it was in like 2014 or 2015. It was like about Jon Stewart and Rand Paul. And for whatever reason, the algorithm randomly decided we're gonna show this video everywhere and recommend it to a huge number of people. And so randomly in like 2019, 2020, I'm looking on my stats on the back end of YouTube, which I don't do often, by the way. And I see, why is my number one video a video about Rand Paul and Jon Stewart from like 2014 or 2015? And it's because something happened in the algorithm where they decided we're going to recommend this a lot. Yeah. And that's the difference between like that video has over 1 million views. And it's like, it's just a random video on Rand Paul and Jon Stewart. And it's like, that's the power of the algorithm. So, so that's a big part of it. And then look, I don't know, probably some of it is just, it is an organic tapering off after an election where people just aren't as interested in politics for whatever reason. And there's only so much I can do about that. I mean, believe me, it frustrates me, but at the same time, I don't lose much sleep over it because I know I'm doing everything I can. So it's like, if the chips are going to fall wherever they may, and they do, then it is what it is. If I wake up tomorrow and lose 5,000 subscribers, or I lose 5,000 5,000 followers on Twitter, which I have lost subs on Twitter or subscribers on Twitter, followers on Twitter too. It is what it is. There's nothing I can do about it. So I try not to stress too much about it, even though it's sort of inevitable that you think every now and then, like, oh, this is kind of bullshit. But,
Right.
you know, what am I going to do? It is what it is.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. Just to clarify, though, when you say you don't have the time to live stream, wouldn't you just be able to do the normal show that you already do, but live?
If I were to do that, then that absolutely would be a giant hit on the individual segment clips. So it's a trade-off in terms of, you know, how many views am I going to get? How much ad revenue am I going to get versus how much is the show going to grow? So there are, like, the Young Turks, I think they used to do this. They probably still do it, where they like live stream the show and then take it down so it doesn't stay up. I mean, that's something that I could do.
Jimmy does that too, I think.
Who does that too? Jimmy?
Oh, I think Jimmy Dore.
Yeah, he does that too. Yeah, so that's something to entertain. I mean, I'm currently working on now, or, you know, getting away from Blog Talk Radio and doing like a different higher quality audio podcasts. I'm working on that right now too. I guess that's a possibility, but you're always balancing certain things. Like, am I going to lose? So instead of videos getting 40,000 views, let's say an individual video, is that now going to drop to 20,000 because 20,000 want to watch it live? And how does that turn around and affect revenue? How does that affect show growth in that respect? So I don't know. These are all things you have to balance.
You'd probably make bank on super chats, is what I think Gavin's getting at, though. You'd probably, like, I don't know how much of your revenue is ad versus the super chat model, but I can imagine that somebody with your, you know, popularity, people are going to want to ask you like 10 million fucking questions, and as long as you sit there, you're going to get people sending you fucking super chats, ringing the fucking bell, which would be, you know, my you know, analysis that would probably offset the ads, because the advertisers fuck all of us, obviously, because, you know, they're massively exploiting our labor.
And I would just add too, Kyle, that a lot of channels actually do their entire show live, and then they'll just upload every single segment from the live show as clips, and it's still, from what I can see, you know, gets about as many views as it would otherwise. I know channels that are even in different genres of YouTube that do that. Like, for example, the John Campea show is a movie-related channel I watch all the time, and they go live for 2 hours every day in the afternoon, and then in the evening time they upload all the clips, and they all do really well. And yeah, I think, you know, Vosh does the same thing. I think he makes his, you know, streams like unlisted after the fact, so you can still access them, but it's a little harder to find on his channel. Anyway, I just think it would be a good way to help grow your channel, you know, engage with the community a little bit more, respond to super chats, maybe have people on the live stream, obviously do whatever you want, but that would just be my suggestion as far as maybe growing Secular Talk a little bit. Because while I do really respect the fact that you've taken the approach that, like, you know, who cares about subs, who cares about money, I do think that's very commendable. What I do worry about, though, is that your ideology and what you stand for as a commentator is going to become less and less relevant because your channel is as well. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, I understand what you're saying. But I to be honest, I don't know how much of a difference. I think the difference would be marginal. Let's say I took all of your advice and I did it exactly like you said, and I, you know, show it live, and then are you saying like show it live and then take it down like TYT does basically, or Jimmy Dore does? Is that
you don't? I don't even think you have to take it down. I mean, that might help.
But see, I feel like that's when your regular clips get hit massively. You know what I'm saying? So like, yeah, you might get people watching it live, but then you don't get people watching the clips later on. It's all a trade-off. But my point is, even if I took all your advice, which I take seriously, maybe the difference is marginal. Maybe instead of losing 2,000 subs a month, I gain 300. You know what I'm saying? So it really, we're just talking about tweaks around the edges here, unless and until the core of it gets addressed, which is YouTube has to get their fucking boot off our neck. I mean, it's that simple. You know, and to your point, there are other channels that have grown, but yeah, it's they've grown by just taking a whole new lane. You know what I'm saying? Like growth of Jimmy Dore, and Jimmy himself would probably admit this, that the growth of Jimmy Dore was like, hey, now I'm going hardcore, like vax skepticism, and that brings in a whole new group of people. So that's just a whole different, you know, segment that's not going to be interested in my videos, no matter what I say or do, because I'm not going to tell them what they want to hear because I don't agree with them. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, that's actually another thing I wanted to ask you about today, Kyle, because obviously one of the things that, you know, I think is the most admirable about your show is that you're not willing to do that, because, you know, the first thing that you realize that's really disappointing when you get into the YouTube game is that YouTube does not reward good behavior. It actually rewards bad behavior, right? Like it doesn't like a monkey can figure this out. We're not fucking talking like, you know, it doesn't take a genius, you know, to figure out that if you like punch the right buttons and you say the right things, that you're going to find an audience of people who are just craving to hear somebody, cognitively jerk them off and like agree with them and like, feed them the bile that they want to consume. And we've seen tons of people do that, and you can make a quick fortune, right? We call it the Rave Dubin effect, right? Because that's exactly what Dave Rubin did back in the day. And you can see people follow that trend. We came up with Jackson Hinkle, and he was this like, left wing, oh, I guess I could see the benefits of voting for Joe Biden. And now he's like a hardcore Putin apologist because that's where the energy went. And you can pivot your show to kind of like ride those waves. And you've been on YouTube for a long time, and you've been able to, pivot and stay relevant through a lot of changes. But you've obviously probably had to deal with this, over and over again, right? With the first being the skeptic, new atheist community, kind of bifurcating into the new right and the new left. You had a lot of those people first lean into the hardcore, like anti-SJW content, and then, straight up right-wing content. And then you kind of went the other way and pivoted. I imagine you felt a pull in some direction at that time. And I'm wondering if you see any parallels between that experience when, your show was very much more rooted towards, being skeptical of theism and the, 700 Club and all the like crazy evangelicals. If you notice that same kind of pivot when, that all went down, where it was like, okay, you're either going to go one way into the, massively a right-wing kind of skeptic community.
Sargon of Akkad.
Yeah, all those kinds of guys. And then you have, who was that guy we were talking about? Dusty Smith. We had TJ Kirk on the other day. People who went the other direction and were left secular talk, obviously. Are you seeing that, happen again? Do you have any, insight into, do you think this is just the way that the tides shift over time? Do you think it's the YouTube algorithm forcing people to go right-wing? Because one of the things Gavin and I always say, and people agree and disagree to varying degrees, is that YouTube is kind of inherently right-wing. It just creates a cesspool for right-wing content kind of naturally because there's a lot of money in that. But do you think it's the, just the, clock or the bell, swinging back and forth? Or do you think it's the, more of the algorithm that's kind of creating that division?
I mean, that's a great question. And to be honest, I don't think I have a great answer on that. I'd have to think about that quite a bit before I come to any conclusion. But I mean, the honest answer about my show and me is that I've never felt any push or pull in any direction. Like, I see the YouTube landscape. I see when certain things rise up and become more popular and when they don't, etc. Like, I can see all that. I understand what's happening, but I never felt any push or pull in any direction, because the thing that got me here in the first place was ignoring whatever the trends are and whatever people are doing and just saying exactly what I think. And then wherever the chips fall, they do. And like, the downside of that is, look, there may come a day where I'm 100% irrelevant, to which I say, so be it. If I'm still saying what I think is correct and letting the chips fall where they may, then it is what it is. Then, I become the old man who's like, get off my lawn. And people are like, fuck him. He's out of touch and he's weird. And it's like, okay, but I mean, get off my lawn from the bottom of my fucking heart. So what do you want me to tell you? But also, I think what you're describing there is a problem that is unique to independent media and new media, which is what I would call audience capture. Like, there are all these problems with, mainstream media that we talk about all the time. I mean, corporate media is a cesspool. And by the way, I would take any independent media person or new media person over traditional media any day of the week. So don't get me wrong here with the criticism that I'm levying. Back to the matter is, yeah, there is something that happens, particularly with creators who care first and foremost about clicks and the views, where it's like, well, this is clicking well, and this is not clicking well. And this might not really be where my heart is, but if I know I'm going to double the size of my audience or get double the views or whatever, if I go in this direction, hey, what's the harm in just going this direction? And I think TJ Kirk, very honestly and earnestly told you that he felt the pull towards that at the beginning of the anti-SJW wave. And he saw that people like Sargon kept going further and further right. And then at a certain point, he pulled the plug and he said, fuck this, I can't do this. But he said, I felt the pull in that direction. And TJ is a phenomenally principled dude. Like, he's a very smart dude, very principled dude. And if he even felt the pull of it, then imagine somebody who's less principled than him and what they feel. And so, that is the downside of new media. That's the downside of independent media. And I mean, my advice that I would give to anybody who's in this space, to you guys or some new person who's starting, is like, look, at the end, you got to be able to sleep at night. And so a year from now, 2 years from now, who cares if you're getting 3 viewers as long as you're speaking from your heart? And, because it can't be about the end result. It just can't be, because then everybody will drive themselves fucking crazy. If you have 1 million subscribers, you want 2. If you have 2, you want 10. If you have 10, you want fucking 40. So like, it can't be about that. It has to be about what's your actual message. What do you care about? How do we fix things? How do we improve things? And if it's not about that, then, at the end of the day, people are they're going to end up not being consistent and not popping and staying relevant, if you will.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's spot on. And I totally agree with what you said about TJ too. He is an extremely principled person. And to see that even had an effect on him, not that I think he ever did go full right wing, but you could tell he kind of, stepped his foot in the water for maybe a year or so and then decided, fuck that, I'm out of this bullshit. So yeah, I totally agree with what you're saying there. In fact, I think I said in that very interview that I think it can happen subconsciously to people. They don't even necessarily realize what's happening. But if you don't come into this space with a really strong ideological foundation, then that could easily be chipped away at and replaced with just whatever your subconscious mind is telling you to gravitate towards in order to maximize your revenue or your, amount of viewers, etc. So, just like with mainstream media, again, obviously I'll take independent media over mainstream media every day of the week, but yeah, it's definitely affected by those kind of waves of what's relevant. Just like with MSNBC, they tried to pivot towards this whole, like, we're serious news now before Trump, and then Trump came about, and it's like, well, throw that out the window. Now we're going to become the Trump derangement syndrome network, and you talk about that all day long at the expense of anything else that's important. So yeah, it's definitely a real phenomena, and it does affect independent media as well as mainstream media, although maybe to a less odious degree perhaps. But another question I had for you, Kyle, that I know a lot of people also have for you, is about Joe Rogan, who's, of course, one of your friends and someone whose show you've been on multiple times. And by the way, I think you've done a great job on there arguing the left-wing position and engaging with Joe. But a lot of people are wondering about this recent endorsement or, quasi-endorsement of Ron DeSantis. We got a super chat here from Colin who asked, why was your response against Joe so tepid when you criticized others a lot harder? So if you would just explain your logic and the way you kind of deal with Rogan and respond to Rogan, I think that might be illuminating for some people.
Well, I just disagree that it was tepid. It wasn't remotely tepid. I gave the strongest, most ironclad arguments I possibly could against Ron DeSantis in showing that Ron DeSantis is a total fraud. Ron DeSantis is not for legalizing marijuana. Ron DeSantis is not for raising the minimum wage. Ron DeSantis has done a number of things that are anti-free speech. The guy in that great More Perfect Union video exposing his corruption and how he's basically a full-on corporate socialist while screwing working people. I was trying to give the most substantive argument I possibly could to show Joe Rogan, hey, this guy is terrible. And even a tepid endorsement of him is sort of inexcusable. And like I did in that video, I gave Bill Maher endless shit because he went from Bernie Sanders to Amy Klobuchar. So how should I react when somebody goes from Bernie Sanders to fucking Ron DeSantis? I should be annoyed by that. I should be outraged by that. And that's exactly what that video is detailing. Now, probably what this person is referring to is that subconsciously they're mad that my tone wasn't more shouty or whatever. And it's like, that it's not necessary to do that. If I'm making the arguments and I'm trying to get through to, look, I made that video. It's a hard line to walk, right? Because you have to I wanted to make sure Joe Rogan himself would listen to it and not immediately dismiss it, while also letting my audience know, and the people who follow me already know Ron DeSantis is a piece of shit. Like, hey man, this is serious and Joe is wrong. So you had to walk that line and strike that right tone. I did that as good as I possibly could. None of it was pre-planned out. It's all just, however I react in the moment while trying to lay out the argument in the video. And look, I think I did a great job about it. And for people, because this is a criticism that I've seen of me previously too, and Pacman has even a couple of times, alluded to the fact, like others who have been on Joe Rogan are very hesitant to criticize Joe Rogan. Check my channel and compare it to his channel. Look at the number of videos that I've done where when I disagreed with Joe Rogan, I did a segment disagreeing with Joe Rogan. I've done it a number of times, and I've done it quite a bit recently. There was one time where I think he said something about UBI, now he's against UBI. I covered that, and I was like, this is nonsense. And I showed how his Reddit turned on him as well. There's been a number of these. Me and Crystal on Crystal Kyle and Friends, when he came out against, I think it was paid paternity leave, her and I did a segment where we literally showed the fucking graphs and compared the U.S. to other countries and showed just how screwed our working people are versus people over there, and that if Joe cares about working people, look, you got to change your mind on this. And he did change his mind on that, by the way. So not only am I saying the things that are relatively correct, but I actually have the track record of changing his mind on some of these things. Now, look, maybe I don't end up changing his mind on the Ron DeSantis thing. Fine, then I'll just keep criticizing him and saying, I think you're wrong about this. And that's all that I could do. You know what I'm saying? But I guess I'm a little sensitive to that criticism of like, oh, you're going softer on him or whatever. When it's like, what I do is I give people credit where I think they deserve credit, and I disagree with them and explain where they're wrong when I think they're wrong. And that's exactly what I done with Rogan. I've done it in as substantive a way as possible. And if you want me to scream and yell, well, then basically what people are asking is for me to take somebody who already views me as a friend and a trusted source and make it so he doesn't look at me like a friend and a trusted source. And whenever I say anything, it's going to hit a brick wall. No, I want him to listen. I want him to change his mind. He's got the #1 podcast in the world. I mean, that's like, this guy's really powerful. And so it's good if he changes his mind, and I'm going to try to facilitate whatever argument I can to explain to him he's wrong, to actually change his mind, not to virtue signal and grandstand like I'm so pure and Rogan's so evil. Because at the end of the day, that would accomplish absolutely. So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, it does. And it kind of reminds me a lot of the way that our community and chat sometimes responds when we interview Glenn, right? Because obviously, like, sometimes we disagree with Glenn Greenwald with him and some of his politics, and we, address them on our show when he comes on. But everybody just wants you to turn into like a piece of shit and a dick with everybody that you disagree with, and just try and like castigate them and like tell them you hate them and that you think that they're like an evil person and all of these things. You're not allowed to just like disagree. So yeah, I completely agree with your response.
Yeah, I totally agree too, Kyle. And I think that your approach has actually been spot on for the reasons that you laid out, which is that if you did come out here with aggression directed towards Joe Rogan and like anger and said, you're stupid and this is terrible, then he wouldn't listen to you. I mean, that's the #1 way to make someone just shut off and stop receiving your criticism, if you piss them off. So the fact that you're able to still kind of walk that line and say, look, I am a fan of Joe Rogan. I do like Joe Rogan, but these are the reasons why you're wrong. That only increases the, chance that he's actually going to listen and take what you said into consideration going forward, which is the ultimate goal. So, I mean, I totally agree with your approach. And I also totally agree that it's absolutely fine to have friends of the show who you don't agree with 100% of the time. And yeah, you give them credit where it's due. And then when you disagree, you voice the criticism in a civil way. I think that's the right approach.
Yeah, and that video was also geared towards anybody who might be a viewer of Joe who is DeSantis curious. I wanted to lay out in as unemotional a way as why DeSantis blows. And I think I succeeded in doing that. I mean, how many links did I show in that thing? Here's a bad thing DeSantis did. Here's another bad thing DeSantis did. Here's the thing DeSantis did that's bad, even by the ideology that you espouse. You know what I'm saying? Like, showing all those things about how he's anti-free speech. That's really important because a lot of people listen to Joe Rogan are massively pro-free speech. So it's like, okay, look here, you say you care about free speech. He doesn't care about it. He's against it. And so if you lay it out in as unemotional and as clear a way as possible, it's about changing Joe's mind, changing anybody's mind who's DeSantis curious, while also trying to say to, my own base of fans who likes me and who's already on the left, look, I'm going to represent our position in a very clear way. But again, I get it. Some people get upset that like, hey, you're not yelling, you're not screaming. Yes, I'm more likely to yell and scream about something if, #1, it's super egregious, and #2, I don't really know the person, or I view them as like an avatar of power and elitism and corruption. You know what I'm saying? So like, yeah, I'm more likely to yell if it's like a politician, you know what I'm saying, or some CEO, somebody I definitely don't know. I'm more likely to yell in that situation than I am if it's somebody who I know means well, but who is genuinely wrong about something. So, I don't know. I would say sometimes the correct response, depending on the facts in question, are to calmly explain in as clear a way as possible. And sometimes, depending on the heat of the moment, etc., maybe the answer is to raise your voice a little bit. But it all depends on the context. It all depends on who you're dealing with. And suffice to say, I think this video with Joe, anybody who goes and watches it cannot walk away saying, I didn't make a very ironclad case as to why Ron DeSantis should never be president. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, another question that a lot of people are wanting us to ask, and obviously this is the Vanguard, so it has to be done. I mentioned earlier that it seemed like this whole independent left YouTube space used to be a lot more united, and that's definitely true. I've been watching you guys since like 2015, 2016, and I still remember back in the good old day. When Jimmy Dore was on TYT and everyone was happy and getting along and all that stuff. And I'm just wondering, is there any possibility, because some people are wondering, is there any possibility that you and Jimmy or anyone else could potentially bury the hatchet at some point and maybe reunite behind whether it's a candidate or just a movement in general, a force the vote style thing? The next time something like that happens, they could potentially unite lefty commentators. Are you opposed to kind of burying the hatchet and letting the past kind of die in favor of reuniting behind something in common?
I have absolutely nothing against Jimmy Dore. I have absolutely nothing against the Young Turks. I have absolutely nothing against any sort of faction on the left. I have disagreements with them, and we can, have the conversations about the disagreements. But in terms of like, am I going to stand on principle if there's some area where we agree? Like, I won't not work with you because you have other things. No, that's ridiculous. That's childish. We're adults, and I think that's the same mindset that I took to when I got dragged into the TYT Jimmy Dore feud. I took that approach, but everybody at the time, and I mean everybody, gave me shit for it. Whether it was my audience, whether it was the Young Turks themselves, whether it was Jimmy Dore himself, because I didn't want to even get involved. Everybody remembers how hard I was trying to stay out of that shit. I don't want to have anything to do with it. And so then I get dragged in and I give my take on it, and people didn't like what I said because a lot of people in my audience were OG TYT fans because they were the OG in the game, and a lot of people were Jimmy Dore fans because he has very passionate fans. And so I went out there and, basically said the exact things that would piss off both camps, making me less popular, making my subs flee too, right? So I did something on principle where I took the approach of, look, I'll agree where we agree, I'll disagree where we disagree, and that ended up getting me in trouble. You know what I'm saying? But that same mindset that made me do that is the same mindset that leads me to the conclusion of I got nothing against these people. Look, they're the ones they hate me. I don't hate them. They hate me. I have disagreements with them, but, they hate me. They all do. Like, Jank hates me. Anna hates me. Jimmy hates me. Oh, abso-fucking-lutely. Are you kidding me? Did you guys see the stuff that was even publicly, the stuff that was going on? Never mind what they were doing privately. I was getting text messages from them where it was totally unhinged stuff, and some of the stuff even spilled over publicly.
Or Jimmy?
Both of them. Jimmy, it was less private. It was more public. Yeah. Jank, it was the opposite. It was more private. I mean, I saw you guys did a thing where like, oh, I muted Anna Kasparian. They're all muted. Anna's muted. Jank's muted. Jimmy's muted. Look, I'm a grown ass man. I don't have time for this shit. Like, I'm here to cover the news, talk about the things I find interesting, and that's the end of it.
Yeah.
My mistake, to the extent I made any mistake in the first place, it was getting close enough to people in the business where I felt a personal loyalty to them. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And so, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, first of all, I don't know if you actually watched our video about you muting Anna, but just so you know, I defended that and said I also have some of our friends of the show muted on our Twitter, which sometimes gets revealed when we're looking at stuff.
Right.
On
Yeah,
Twitter.
I mean,
I'm like, oh shit, oops, I didn't mean to show that. So yeah, that was just more of a fun kind of LOL.
Yeah. But I know you're not coming out against it, but even if you did, it's fine. It's no big deal. I mean, I've never blocked anybody in my history of being on Twitter, but I will mute the shit out of somebody if they're annoying me. But also, I don't really read any stuff anyway. Like Anna, I follow, and so she would come up on my thing, and she would take these pot shots at me, these underhanded shots. And to this day, they still do it in videos. They think, Jank thinks, he doesn't say it because I think it would be too hard of a case to make, but he still thinks I'm part of like the fake left, right? Like he would call, he did the thing the other day, oh, Jimmy and Brianna Joy Gray and all these, they're all the Glenn fake left. And he throws me in that group. He throws Crystal in that group. He didn't say my name. I'm sure he thinks of me in that group as well. And so, look, I don't want to deal with that shit. I don't want to deal with it. I mean, they could think whatever they want about me, say whatever they want about me. It's totally fine. It's out of mind in my opinion. But if you're asking me, am I okay? If there's an area where I agree with Jank and Jimmy, am I going to say, hey, credit? Absolutely. That's all I do is I keep it real no matter where the conclusion lands. And I guess the difference is, look, there are two competing values here. One of them is everybody in this space wants to be like, I'm the truth teller. I'm going to tell it like it is no matter what happens. And if that means pissing off my closest allies, so be it, because I'm going to die on this hill, right? That's one instinct everybody has. And there is something about that that's, principle that people gravitate towards, right? But at the same time, there's a competing value there, which is, wait a second, I believe in solidarity, which means giving my fellow, people in this same space, fellow lefties, the grace and the leeway to have areas where we agree to disagree, where I'm like not going to slit your throat and never want to work with you again if you disagree with me on a certain thing, right? And that's also something that's commendable, and there's something that's principled about that too. But those things are at odds with each other, right? Like you could either be the truth teller who tells it like it is and pisses off the people close to you if they piss you off, or you could be, no, I believe in solidarity, so I'm going to sort of let shit slide a little bit.
Well,
right?
I feel like I feel like you're the kind of guy that, and we try and, you know, embody this as well. I feel like there is kind of, there's a middle of the road path, right? Like you just said that you would work with Jimmy, you would work with Jake. I would work with Jimmy, though, you know, he's pissed me off, fucking Lord knows. You know, I would work with a lot of people that you know, we used to have Spike Cohen on the show pretty semi-regularly. He was the VP with Joe Jorgensen for the Libertarian Party. And, you know, he was a fucking crazy person when it came to like regulation and economics. But we were talking a lot during the George Floyd era, right? You know, and I would passionately criticize Spike. I'm sure he would call me like a crazy socialist, right? But on these areas of agreement, like, you know, I think we would all be perfectly willing to, you know, like stand against police brutality with like libertarians or somebody that's, you know, has far more disagreement with me and on an economic standpoint than somebody like Cenk Uygur or Anna Kasparian, you know?
Yeah, no, and that's the exact point I was going to make too, which is, so then the thing that everybody has to try to do is balance those two competing values. You have to care deeply in solidarity and extend that olive branch. At the same time, also not backing off of your principles and your ideology and being a truth teller. You have to do both those things. And the way that you do it, I think the most effective way is to let everybody know, look, I got nothing against you. I got nothing against you whatsoever. If we disagree, fine, we disagree and we can have that conversation. But ultimately, at the end of the day, am I angry at Cenk? You angry at Jimmy Dore when I lay my head down on my? Of course not. They're the ones who are angry at me. They don't like me because I dared to, you know, say something that was very unpopular at the time, which I think, by the way, over time, people now look back and they go, oh, Kyle was actually being pretty reasonable. Yeah,
it really
exactly.
was. Yeah.
And at the time, I got dragged through the fucking coals at the time. I absolutely did. But I stand by every single goddamn word I said back then. Every word. And the other thing that people don't realize is so the one area where we messed up is me and Crystal, you know, Jimmy was supposed to come on the show and we didn't tell him, let's not do this. And then he reached out the day of like, hey, are we doing the thing? And we tried to nicely be like, look, it's not a good idea, etc. The reason why I didn't want to talk to him is because I would have had to ask questions where I know he would have hated it. I know he would have lashed out. And I know fact because that guy Primo Radical talked to Jimmy and asked similar questions that I was going to ask. And Jimmy flipped the fuck out on him. Right. And so in a sense, I was trying to be like, hey, let's let this thing cool off. I don't want to get in the middle of it. And if anything, I'm sort of doing you a favor because if I ask the questions that I feel compelled to ask, I have a duty to ask, being in the that I'm in, then you're going to fucking be pissed at me. And he did not realize that, like, this is what I'm doing. It's almost like a heads up type shit, you know? So, and then, of course, you know, the Young Turks, because I dared to give any credence to some of Jimmy's points that I was persona non grata over there. So, but look, either way, at the end of the day, like I said, nothing against the Young Turks. I disagree with them plenty. By the way, we can talk about that if you want. Jimmy, disagree with them plenty. We can talk about that. I got nothing against any of them. And I wish all of them well. And I hope that both of them, you know, them at their best moments, I hope that's them in perpetuity forever. Because when I've seen Cenk go on some glorious rants, old school Cenk Uygur was a force to be reckoned with. And he was a big inspiration to me. Old Jimmy Dore, there are some Jimmy Dore rants that are historic in how amazing they are.
They're so good.
They're so good. And so I want to see more of their good stuff. And I wish them the best. And I hope that they can do that in perpetuity.
Yeah, well, I'm sure they're not, but I really honestly hope that they're watching or they hear that you say that at some point. Because it's always floored me how petty both sides were when it came to that thing. And not to just simp for you, Kyle, but I do think that you handled that in a remarkably kind of grown-up way, a reasonable way. You know, you did, like you said, you didn't want to get dragged in the first place, but once you were brought to that point, you were just honest about how you felt. And obviously no one's perfect, but you just said what you believed. And the way that they both treated you, you know, sending you fucking text messages, villainizing you on their shows over, you know, what ultimately boiled down to a petty personal disagreement, not even anything substantive or policy related. It really did, you know, just show me that they both had a real strain of just pure narcissism, frankly, that I just don't see in you. So, you know, shout out to you.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. I really appreciate it. And but I assure you that within the course of this conversation, instead of looking at the overall message, they'll dive into specifics and nitpick it and use that as further reason to hate me and despise me and view me as the fake left or whatever. So, I mean, it is what it is. All I can do is say exactly how I feel.
It's funny, too, because on Jimmy's side, he thinks you're fake left, and then TYT, they think you're fake left. So it's like, It's like we're all leftists here. I just hate that shit too. It's like, oh, you're a fake leftist. It's like, no, if you identify as a left, if you say I'm a leftist, then okay, I'll grant you that you're on the left, and then we'll disagree wherever we disagree. But I'm not going to resort to the intellectually lazy of tactic of just being like, you're actually not on the left. You're a fake leftist.
Yeah. And it's like the whole premise of it I find silly too, because it's like, even if I were to, let's say I grant Jimmy, you know what, man, it's true, you're leftier than thou, or I tell TYT, you guys are leftier than thou, like, and like,
yeah,
who
where
gives
do we
a
go from
fuck?
here? We still have no power, right? There's no power for any of us.
So it really is a posturing, virtue signal-y type thing. Like,
yeah,
I'm the one true one. It's like, okay, even if I say okay to that, whoop-de freaking do. Like, what next? Yeah, like you said, what next? What are we going to talk about?
Well,
what are we going to do? How are we going to fix it, etc.?
Yeah, that actually kind of leads well into my next question. You know, one of the things that we've talked about, you know, in passing throughout this entire show, or alluded to a lot, is just a you know, extreme factioning of the left, right? You know, everything was broken apart post Bernie. You know, 2016, I feel like there was a lot of unity, slightly, yes, less unity in 2020, right? You had a little more division. Some people went the Tulsi route. Some people were like flirting with Andrew Yang. There was much less like, I hate Hillary and I'm with Bernie Sanders. You know, it was just a little more sporadic, but still Bernie was the clear favorite among all of the, you know, the authentic lefties, as we just said. We're not going to call anybody not fake lefties, but for me, it seemed like the clear choice. Gavin and I were, you know, still in the Bernie camp. Obviously, you know, you were Captain Bernie, bro. So, you know, we were all riding hard for Bernie Sanders. And then after that bottom fell out, everybody was just lost, right? Because, you know, now you have Joe Biden, and he's, you know, doing an absolute terrible job governing, which, you know, ushers in a ton of right-wing energy. And, you know, this idea that, you know, right-wing populism is actually the solution, even though we've pointed out 10 million ways on our show that right-wing populism doesn't exist. Show me a right-wing candidate that's not taking fucking oil from big oil and all that fucking shit, right? So, you know, but even still, that's become like kind of like a tantalizing, like alluring thing, right? You know, for obvious reasons, people are getting sympathetic to Ron DeSantis now, who's, as you pointed out, obvious tool of the establishment, you know, et cetera. So now there's way less unity on the left. And, you know, you've pointed out that, you know, you're interested in Marianne Williams' candidacy for president, perhaps to challenge Joe Biden in the primaries. You know, I guess what do you expect to see out of that? You know, how do you expect the left to kind of, you know, regroup? I imagine, or I'm guessing, like, do you think that they're going to get behind Marianne in like a Bernie Sanders style? Do you imagine this as more of like a protest vote? Do you think if it is going to be a protest vote, that there would be merit to using somebody with the name recognition of Marianne Williamson to get to, you know, 5% on a third party? I know you've, you know, voiced an opposition to that in the past, though. I just, you know, imagine if Joe Biden decides to run again, you know, what other options does the left have, really? And then, you know, as a little bit of a, you know, caveat to that, you know, Marianne Williamson's a super, super lovely person. And I, you know, my political disagreements with her, you know, aside, she was extremely lovely with us when we chatted and all that. I'm wondering if you think that it might be hard for her to tap into that wide spanning, you know, voting population that Bernie was able to tap in, all the people that, you know, would listen to Sam Cedar, to like Shoe on Head, to like, you know, not to categorize everybody by the YouTubers audience that they would fucking get into, but people in Oklahoma, you know, Latinos in Texas, you know, people in New York City that were going to NYU, all these people got behind Bernie Sanders. Do you think that somebody like Marianne Williamson will be able to have that broad appeal, particularly when they start to dredge up and, you know, slander her, if you're, you know, just, you know, bring up a lot of the more unsavory elements of her, like 90s, you know, mysticism, you know, like, you know, essentially telling, you know, people with AIDS that, you know, sickness is an illusion and that they should, you know, all these kind of things that the media is going to dredge up. Do you think she'll be able to be as successful as Bernie? Like, I'm just wondering what you envision here.
Yeah, so the reason why I was so hot on Marianne running this time around is that I actually think she has a similar appeal as Bernie, plus an aspect that Bernie was lacking. Look, Bernie is a man after my own heart. He's similar to me in the sense that he's just very straightforward and, we have a problem, let's fix the problem. What's the problem? Let's do that. And there's something about that pierced through, and he had his era, he had his runs. I mean, in 2016, I think he basically won it. WikiLeaks showed the finger on the scale. It's 2020, he kind of let me down even more, but with his inability at the end to close it out, which is really the biggest red flag to me. Marianne Williamson has a similar appeal as Bernie in terms of the policies, but she has that extra level of, because of that whole like mysticism thing, she tries to get more to the root and explain to people that, because now we have to do this. Before we didn't have to do this. Now we have to do this. We need to explain to people that a better world is actually possible. Like we need to, now there's a whole new wall that's up for young people, for lefties, for working people of like, well, now I'm totally nihilistic. I'm such a doomer and I don't think anything's even possible to get better. So you need a candidate who can first and foremost let that guard down and then get through with the message of the economic populism, etc. And I think that that's what Marianne Williamson brings to the table. Now, I hope she's the one. I think she might be the one. But it's other scenarios are possible too. It's possible there's people are now, who was it? Chapo, I think, was talking about JB Pritzker, like the fat billionaire. The fat billionaire who's actually sort of low-key based in some ways. Yeah. Like he's Fetterman, maybe not for 2024, but for 2028. We could have a conversation about Fetterman.
What do you make of Pritzker, Kyle?
Honestly, I don't know enough about him. I don't know enough about him to say for sure if I could co-sign him, But just the fact that somebody like Chapo, who I like, is Pritzker curious, makes me Pritzker curious, So, and remember, FDR was a traitor to his class. So he was an elite. He was from that background. And then basically welcomed their hatred and took them to task. And so it's possible Pritzker represents that, but it's also possible he's another fucking scam artist, neoliberal shill. Like, whatever.
Hard to trust a billionaire, somebody with billions of dollars.
Very true. There are red flags there for sure.
The one thing I would say about Pritzker real quick, just to break in, is that it doesn't even seem like, there's this whole meme of like socialists for Pritzker and stuff. It doesn't even really seem like people are in any way expecting him to, bring Medicare for all or socialism or anything like that. It seems like his whole appeal is just a very low bar that he was able to actually deliver on some of the promises that he made to the people of Illinois before they elected him as governor. And if you contrast that to Biden, who hasn't done fucking Dickie McGeezax, to borrow a phrase from yourself, Kyle, you look at a guy like Pritzker, and again, he's not a fucking socialist. He's just a normie Democrat, really, but he actually is a Democrat in the way that, Joe Biden is more, frankly, a Republican. So a guy like JB Pritzker would actually stand up for abortion rights. He would actually try to get something done in that regard, whereas Biden is just not doing anything, probably because he doesn't agree with the abortion rights. He's actually a Republican secretly.
Yeah, that's part of the problem, right? Is that the bar is so goddamn low that people are like, if you could clear the lowest bar that anybody's ever set ever, then you know what, we'll consider it. Because now we're talking about just getting back rights that we had 5.5 minutes ago. It's like, well, hold on. What? We're rehashing the old battles now? We're going to have to go back and argue gay marriage again? We're going to have to go back and argue a right to contraception again? We're talking about a 10-year-old rape victim denied an abortion in Ohio. We're having this conversation now? When are we ever going to get to the conversation about, higher minimum wage or universal health care, et cetera? I mean, look at this place that we're in right now. So yeah, that is part of the problem. But to your question, to the original question, look, I do see some signs that the left is... Maybe they feel like they've been in the wilderness long enough and it's time to get a little more intelligent and a little more strategic. Just the fact, I know this is almost sad to admit, just the fact that almost everybody gave Crystal credit for destroying Bill Maher, that made me happy. When you have both Sam Cedar and Jimmy Dore talking about it and saying similar things, that progress. That's like, okay, look, there are real...
Clip, by the way.
It was. I think she did a phenomenal job. Funny enough, I think I've mentioned this, but behind the scenes, she wasn't sure that she did a good job. Afterwards, she was like, I don't know. There were 3 of them and 1 of me, or right. 2 of them and 1 of me. And I had to tell, like, no, you did a great job. You did a great job. The fact that, because that goes to your question earlier. Oh, if the time came, would you work with the Young Turks? Would you work with Jimmy Dore? And the answer is obviously, of course. If they're right about something, I'll say they're right about something. It's no big deal. That was a sign of that exact mentality. Because it wasn't that long ago, Jimmy did a video where he called Crystal pro-war media and had her in the thumbnail. So,
yeah. Speaking of Jimmy, one more thing about Jimmy, and because you were talking about that crystal ball segment, I watched his breakdown of that appearance on Bill Maher, and he did give her credit, like you said. But I do remember he even threw a shot at you though, because they were talking about the CARES Act, obviously being the greatest upward transfer of wealth, and he was like, yeah, clearly Crystal Ball understands this, but guys like Kyle Kulinski, they will defend the CARES Act and say, well, despite all of that shit, you had to vote for it anyway in order to get people the menial benefits that it did provide. But I don't really remember that being your commentary. Were you saying that people should vote for the CARES Act?
100% was not my commentary. I was incredibly critical of the CARES Act. And by the way, this is extra hilarious because this is the guy who, Crystal voted for Joe Biden. I did not vote for Joe Biden.
Right.
So I am more in alignment with his philosophy, but he takes the shot at me again because it's all personal with him. It's all personal. It's got nothing to do with the policy of it. It's got nothing to do with the politics of it. Look, when he decided I was it was no holds barred. He was out there liking the tweets about how, I was Me Tooing somebody who I never fucking talked to once in my life on an Instagram account that people swore was mine. But I was on record for years before saying, I don't even have a fucking Instagram. Humanist Report dug up the video of me and Corin talking about it years ago where I'm like, Instagram? I've never been on Instagram. There's a fake person on Instagram with my name or whatever pretending to be me. And we asked that person to change it to the unofficial Kyle Kulinski shit, right? Which they did, but then apparently they changed it back because they were trying to get me in trouble and fucking Me Too and women and shit. But anyway, people knew that, and he probably knew that, but he was like, fuck it, Kyle's the enemy, so I don't care. Throw it against the wall and whatever sticks. Right. That's the thing that gets back to what I was talking about before. I hold no ill will towards anybody. I'm not taking personal shots at any. But if, when they come after me in such a vituperative way, in an over-the-top way, in a way that's obviously untrue, when they say things that are factually untrue, like I supported the fucking CARES Act, nonsense, right? So what am I supposed to do in a situation like that? That's why this is one of the many reasons why I've gotten to the place where it's like, look, all I do is I put my blinders on, I go and do my show and let the chips fall where they may, and I don't read any of the backlash, I don't read any of the nonsense coming at me, because I would go fucking crazy if I did, being immersed in shit like this every day. And then there's people out there who actually believe the nonsense that he's spewing, right? So like, what am I supposed to do? There is no winning. And then if I respond to him on my own show, in my own clip, I just bring more attention to it. And then there'll be trolls that are on his team ignoring the fact that I'm factually right about what my position was at the time. It's a joke. It's a joke. Yeah. So, I just leave it as it is. I didn't even watch the Jimmy video, by the way. I just saw that he had a title that was, built, destroyed by Crystal or whatever the fuck. Sure. I was like, oh, good. He was fair for once.
Yeah. And by the way, speaking of the whole Instagram fake Me Too thing, I do want to say we're sorry for the way we covered that at the time. We realized in retrospect, obviously pretty immediately, that was bullshit. And, just wanted to say that we do apologize for that.
Well, thank you. Thank you for saying that.
Immediately right afterwards. But yeah, we fucked that up too because we were live when we were reacting to it and we were like, holy shit, this happened. Anyway, yeah, we do owe you an apology for that, man.
Well, thank you for saying that. I appreciate that. That was another one of the things where I saw, because a lot of people, that spread very quickly, right? And when I saw that, I think I DM'd Glenn and I was like, I don't even know who this fucking woman is. Like, what is this? What is going on here? And he was like, are you going to address it? And he basically told me, like, you have to address this. And so I did, but I tried to do it to keep it as low key as possible. I responded directly to her on Twitter and was like, look, here's a tweet of me from years ago saying I don't have an Instagram. Here's Humanist Report. God bless him. He dug up the old clip of me and Corin talking about it where I was like, that's not me on Instagram. And that was another one of the things where I was like, man, everybody's eyes off the ball and everybody's just being so vicious against each other for no goddamn reason. And that really did make me sort of go more into my shell because I was like, I feel like I'm out here trying to do the best I can. And then like everybody turns on me like a shark in an instant. And it's like, okay, well, fuck all this then. You know what I mean? But apologizing, I do appreciate that.
Yeah, of course, man. And, we were a pretty young channel again at the time and not to justify anything, but I do remember that being a clear first lesson where I was like, sometimes it's not just worth chasing the clicks because I was like, oh, I know if we talk about this, it's going to get thousands of views, but I instantly felt bad about it. I was like, we don't know what's going on here. That was baseless speculation. Shouldn't have even, touched that, honestly. So, again, obviously it's been a long time now, but did just want to say we felt bad about that. But back to
I forgive you guys. I forgive you guys.
Thanks, Kyle. Unlike some people, you're not incredibly vindictive and petty, apparently, and never can bury a hatchet. So we appreciate that about you. But yeah, there was another question I had, which kind of goes back to the subject matter of Bernie Sanders, Marianne Williamson, where exactly the left is at. And that's just, what do you think the actual chances are of there being a serious primary for the Democratic nomination in 2020? Because as much as they keep saying, oh, Biden's going to run again, I think that even if Biden does run again, I'm starting to think with his complete malfeasance and just utter incompetence on display right now, forget the left, forget Bernie Sanders or Marianne Williamson. I think motherfuckers like Howard Stern might challenge him, or, people like that are just like, I see a lane for myself. I'm an opportunist at heart, and I'm going to take advantage of the situation to, get in the news, get all the attention, because that's half of, what running for president even is. It's just an exercise in media. It's an exercise in getting attention and bolstering your name recognition. So think about all these, opportunists out here that they're not going to let the fucking Joe Biden just take the nomination when he's so unpopular. What do you think, though?
So there was a story that just came out recently. The New York Times had it, of the DNC is now switching around the primary schedule, and they're trying to put Michigan first. Michigan is a state where Biden is strong and he's got a lot of allies there. And so they're trying to load the deck to give Biden as much help as he can possibly get. They're basically trying to rig it for Biden way in advance. I think Biden wants to run. I think that other Democratic elites look around and they go, it ain't Kamala, it ain't Mayor Pete. They're polling even worse than Biden. I think we have no choice but to prop up his dead carcass. So I think all that's true. I also think, though, look, there's no guarantee he's going to be fucking alive in 2024. And I think you're right that historically speaking, usually primaries against an incumbent president from within the party work. That's the history of it. But not every election is the same. And it's very clear that we sort of hit a tipping point in the country where you're seeing preposterous numbers. I mean, I just covered this today. 71% says they don't want Biden to run for re-election. 51% says they don't want Trump to run for re-election. We're talking about historic unpopularity for the two people who are most likely to be candidates going into 2024. So that does open up a lane. Now, it's possible that somebody comes into the Democratic Party and primaries him as some semblance of an outsider. It's possible you get somebody like Andrew Yang in the Forward Party position themselves as we're moderate, centrist, etc. They get somebody like Mark Cuban to run for president, and he might get. I mean, he's independently wealthy. He might get Ross Perot type numbers where he gets about 15% of the vote in a federal national election, and that's even with the being super rigged against independent candidates. All that's possible. I really think right now it's anyone's ballgame. Still, the most likely scenario is Biden versus Trump again, but then you also have very good possibility of Biden versus DeSantis, but then you also have a very good possibility of just a revolt from within the Democratic Party, the likes we've never seen before, where it is possible that a primary from within the party could unseat him. Yeah. But I guess it's a little too soon to tell, and at this point, it's pretty much all speculation on our part.
Right. No, I think that you're really onto something there. And I say that because, again, obviously people like myself and Zach and you, we hate Biden. We want him out of there. We want there to be a new leader for the left. Not that, Biden even represents or has anything to actually do with the left, but you know what I mean? But now I see people that are normie Democrats, people that normally would have no problem voting blue no matter who, or supporting the presidential incumbent of the Democratic Party. Now I see these people, they're into their rope, especially after Roe versus Wade, and Biden and Harris both just completely fumbling the ball and failing to present any sort of charismatic vision forward. I talk about this all the time, but obviously we saw with Andrew Cuomo. You don't even have to really be good at doing your job. You just have to pretend to be good at it if you're in politics. Optics is more than half the battle. And I think Cuomo really proved that, again, until all the, scandals took him down. But I mean, when he was governor of New York during the pandemic, it's not like he was doing particularly that amazing of a job, but he was pretending to do such a good job. He was presenting this vision. He was presenting this path forward for New Yorkers. He was presenting charisma and confidence during his daily press briefings. And that's literally all that most voters needed. But with Biden, we don't even have that. Right. We don't have any charisma, and normie dim voters who genuinely are now freaking out about one of the few things that Democrats are supposed to actually do and protect, which is abortion rights. When he's, not even presenting strength or, projecting any sort of competence on that subject, then that's when I really see his presidency, going off the cliff. Because again, if you can't even hold the normie base of Democratic voters, then you have nothing, right? Because regular people don't fucking like you. So I really think that, normie Dems, they're gonna try to get behind someone who's just a little bit more charismatic. Because again, we all know that the fucking mainstream Democrats, they're not going to give us Medicare for all, or they're not going to really restructure the economy in a serious way. But the one goddamn hill they are supposed to die on is abortion rights. Like, that's the one reason why you're supposed to vote for Democrats instead of Republicans, because of issues like that. But now we see they're not even doing anything on that. So again, normie Dem voters who never expected socialism or healthcare, even they're feeling shortchanged now, because they're like, what the hell, man? This is the one fucking reason why we're supposed to vote for you guys. Then you have characters like a J.B. Pritzker enter the picture, who again is basically just a normie Democrat. He's no socialist, but he can at least project that strength and charisma and seemingly have the ability to deliver on the bare minimum basic promises he made to voters. So I really do think a door for a guy like that's going to open. And again, even if that doesn't mean a victory for the left, I still think that Joe Biden is kind of toast.
Yeah, I wouldn't go. I agree with the entire analysis up until the last line. I wouldn't say he's toast, but I would say it is very possible that he's toast. And I see the same thing you see. I see normie Democrats who are like, wait, what? Like, so nothing. We're going to get nothing, and we're going to roll the clock back. And you guys are going to be out there with fundraising emails 5 minutes after Roe versus Wade is overturned. Like, how about you do something? And look, I mean, the Democratic Party has really been unmasked as what it's been for the past few decades, which is the consultant industrial complex. People in the Democratic Party, the staffers, they are just trying to climb that ladder of careerism. They're trying to hang on to their positions of power. The politicians are careerists. They're trying to hang on to their positions of power. They're coasting off that big donor money. And ultimately, at the end of the day, what you're seeing is their belief in institutionalism and the norms has now made it so that they aid and abet authoritarianism on the right. Because if no matter what your response is, I believe in our institutions, we'll defend our institutions. Well, what happens when the institutions go rogue and they go authoritarian and they do something like roll back abortion rights? Then you sit by and say, well, since I believe in our institutions, it is what it is, and we just have to abide by that ruling. So then wait a second. What if they keep doing authoritarian things? Do you just sit by the entire time and say, that's our institutions, that's what the result is? And the answer is yes, that's what they're going to do. And people are realizing, normie Dems, to your point, are realizing, okay, Roe versus Wade just got rolled back. Clarence Thomas and his decision also floated rolling back gay marriage, floated rolling back the right to contraception, floated rolling back sodomy laws. We're looking at sodomy laws. States can ban sodomy. What are we talking about here? And normie Democrats are looking at that like, oh, it's almost like they had that light bulb moment where, oh, the left has been warning about this entire time is true. Yeah. That they're weak, they're, dilapidated, and they're corrupt. And that's going to take us in right down a path to right-wing authoritarianism.
Yeah, I think that's 100% spot on. I actually really like and often borrow your analogy that the Democratic Party is like the Washington Generals, right? That they're never going to beat the Harlem Globetrotters, like maybe once in all of history they've beat the Harlem Globetrotters. But anyway, you were obviously one of the initial big channels in the skeptic community, and I wanted to hit you with a little bit of a throwback kind of a question. I don't know how much time we have with you, so this will be my last question for you. But I saw an article in Jacobin either early this morning, I think it might have come out yesterday though, where they were writing about the Institute for Christian Socialism wanting to bring left politics to American Christianity. And in response to the kind of discussion that you guys were laying out about how regular normie people, particularly Democrats, are kind of waking up to the fact that there's a rising wave of real evangelical threats to freedom, Christian fascism, as somebody like Chris Hedges would put it. They're fundamentally, tactically now about to gain real power in a way that they only had rhetoric power in the past, right? So, as you mentioned, overturning gay marriage, outlawing sodomy, they've already stripped a woman's right to an abortion away, all these different things, the Supreme Court had the ruling about being 100 miles from the border, all these different, hardcore, archaic, right-wing, particularly like Christian doctrines that they've laid out. And, this piece essentially argues that these could be functional battlegrounds for people who are socialists to, propose a different reading of Christianity to these people who are so heavily indoctrinated. It's very hard to get somebody who's, dirt poor in the South and all they have is their fucking religion, right, to just give up their religion, right? And I was wondering what you guys, both of you actually, as staunch atheists, I'm a staunch atheist as well, but I'm kind of sympathetic to this argument, think about, trying to engage, with these impoverished, often evangelical communities through a, different reading of Christianity that would celebrate things like socialism. Jesus was a socialist. He didn't believe in capitalism. Cornel West always quotes the part of the Bible running the money changers out of the temple, or all those different kinds of things. Christianity was built on an anti-poverty message, all these different things. Do you guys think that's a functional message for the left to, spend some time and energy on, this idea that you can repurpose Christianity and take it away from being this like ironclad tool of the right to, subjugate and persecute communities, and also strip away people's rights nationally, and then kind of aid in this like new socialist wave? Or do you guys think it's a waste of time, dealing with people who are so deeply indoctrinated?
I mean, my answer is whatever works. It sort of goes back to the conversation we were having about Joe Rogan and him endorsing Ron DeSantis and how I reacted to it. Sometimes you need a tone that's more, hey, emotion out of it. Let me just walk you through the facts. Sometimes you need a tone that's a little more harsh and biting. I think it's the same thing. Certain arguments work in certain settings and don't work in other settings. So yeah, if you're, to your point, if you're engaging with somebody who's working class, they're poor, one of the only things they have is their religion, they believe it in their core, then yeah, the way you engage with them is to say, hey man, according to your own standard, look at the Bible. It's not how it's portrayed. It's not like Jesus is a capitalist gun-toting right-winger. He's just not. He's a Marxist before Marxism was a thing. Like, this is what he is. And so, yeah, explaining it in that respect could pay dividends, man. That could work for. But I would say in other contexts, it's not even worth it to have the conversation on religious grounds. But I do think most of the country thinks in a more secular way when it comes to politics. There is a group of very committed evangelicals who think in religious terms, but for everybody but that group, I would say, no, you just engage in, on secular grounds and say, who cares what religion says about anything? Am I going to quote the Bhagavad Gita when talking about tax policy? No, that's ridiculous. So we shouldn't talk about the Bible when talking about tax policy. But yeah, in that context, sure, fight them on those grounds and say, look, according to your own standard. I mean, abortion is a great example. I mean, in the Bible is not quote unquote pro-life. There's a passage in the Bible which talks about how if your wife cheats on you, you should give her bitter water and that'll make her miscarry. That's the Bible prescribing abortion if your wife cheats on you. So, you make that argument and all of a sudden people, whoa, hold on. The book that I base my life is also pro-choice? Well, maybe I should be pro-choice. That's a fair argument in many contexts and it could work.
Absolutely. Well, we do have just a few questions that have popped up in the chat, Kyle. So if you have time, do you want to take a couple of those? If you don't, that's totally fine. All right, cool. Well, here's an interesting one from Truth Teller. Truth Teller asks, Joe Manchin has the highest net approval rating, plus 16 in West Virginia, while Biden is negative. Seems his politics works in West Virginia. Thoughts?
So that's the media's fault. Because if you guys remember, there were polls that came out on the Build Back Better agenda when it first came out. And virtually every single provision of the Build Back Better bill was super popular in West Virginia. So in other words, when you broke the bill down to what's actually in it, universal pre-K, elder care, extended child tax credit, list goes on and on. All those good things that were in it. Every one of them was popular. It was even, I think it was 56% of Republicans in West Virginia supported Build Back Better when you explain the components and the different policies in it. So the reason why Joe Manchin is viewed so favorably and is liked so much in West Virginia is because he postures and positions himself as, I'm a maverick. I'm an outsider. I'm sticking it to both parties in Washington, D.C. And look at me, iconoclastic. Like, I'm fighting for you. I'm a West Virginia Democrat. The reason I say it's the media's fault is it's the media's job to say, here's a guy who says he's a West Virginia Democrat. Why does he oppose what West Virginians want? Look at these polls. It's astonishing. It's overwhelming just how much people disagree with Joe Manchin. And of course, the media could have educated people on Joe Manchin's deep corruption. I mean, there was that Intercept article called Joe Manchin's Dirty Empire. The guy's getting rich off of fossil fuels as he sits on the committee that's going to determine what we do about climate change. That's fucking crazy. And so the problem is the numbers wouldn't be like this if the media did their job on Joe Manchin. But since they don't do their job, the people in West Virginia, all they see is his posturing and his folksy, like, well, God, golly, I'm just holding both parties accountable. And so they like him as a result of it. So this is a colossal failure of the media. Without explaining the truth, you're never going to get him viewed in the proper light, in the proper context. And as a result of it, yeah, he's a massive favorite in elections in West Virginia, and he's won in perpetuity.
Yeah, it's a weird thing that the media is definitely responsible for this, obviously, but all of our corrupt politicians, but how effective they've made it seem to just like average Joes who don't pay attention to politics that much because they're fucking busy. I'm not like maligning them. That like somebody who just makes a like, we need to balance the budget, damn it, kind of an argument is just always going to be the one that they're like, yeah, that guy knows what's up, because it's just the argument that you're taught is the rational argument if you pay absolutely no attention to how fiscal policy works in this country, which is why the left should message better on that. But yeah, I 100% agree.
Yeah, it's a good point. Good point.
Absolutely. Here's a comment from Mike H. Thank you so much, Mike, for the $5. Kyle converted me from a Crowder/Shapiro watcher to a leftist, and for that, I will always be grateful.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate that, man. That means a lot.
Mike. And here's one from Colin. Thank you, Colin, for the $4.99. How do you feel about Justice Democrats now, given how ineffective they have been to push policy and push the establishment left? Would you agree with that assessment?
Yeah, I largely agree with it. I mean, I think every now and then one of them will have their moments where you're like, oh, good, you're better than your average Democrat and you're better than, the Democratic leadership by far. But yeah, they largely go along to get along. They think they're like being strategic and playing the insider game, but no, they get rolled 95% of the time. I mean, again, I don't want to be too harsh because you see like when Cory Bush, for example, was able to get an extension of the eviction moratorium. Now, eventually, I think the Supreme Court slapped that down as well. But like, there were instances where, oh shit, they're doing a good thing. That's what's up. But by and large, that analysis is where, they're not successful. I mean, if you only win 5% of the battles, 10% of the battles, or move the needle 5% or 10% in the right direction, it's like, you're kind of pathetic. You're kind of pathetic. And I blame myself for that. And I blame us founders for that because we vetted for policy beliefs. So do you believe in, the right things, Medicare for all, higher minimum wage, et cetera, et cetera? And the answers were yes on all that stuff, but we never vetted for leadership ability. And if you have all the right policy views, but you're not a leader, you're a follower, well, then nothing's going to get done because God forbid they actually stood together, voted as a block, talked to Joe Biden and said, we'll block everything you're trying to pass unless you sign these executive orders. So you better sign these executive orders. They would never do that. They'd be afraid of Biden saying something back against them. They'd be afraid of the media portraying them as helping Republicans or whatever. And like, you need to be willing to take on some of these fights. You need to be willing to have the media hate you. You need to be willing to have Democratic leadership view you as the enemy. You need to take some risks because obviously this insider strategy has gotten us to where we are right now, where everything's terrible. So for the love of God, stand up, have some spine. Again, I'm going to be fair. I'll give credit where it's due. There's some people who I think make the erroneous argument that like the squad is equal to a Joe Schmo Republican, or perhaps even worse than a Joe Schmo. I think that's stupid. I don't entertain that nonsense. That's false equivalence bullshit. But yeah, the areas where I'm giving them credit are few and far between because they earned that. When 90% of the time, 95% of the time they're letting me down. Well, I have to explain that they're letting me down. So it is what it is.
And a follow-up question from me on that front. It does seem like there's been a new kind of strain, so to speak, of like leftist candidate. A guy like John Fetterman comes to mind, where he's not really associated with like the Bernie movement of 2016 to 2020, but he is repping some of the same values. Are you at all optimistic about a guy like John Fetterman? And what do you think he could potentially do if he was elected to the Senate that would separate him from the Justice Democrats? Or do you think he will do that at all? Or will he just become a normal Democrat?
My answer on that is a little complex and convoluted because on the one hand, I feel like I'm skeptical of everyone and everything. But then on the other hand, I can acknowledge when something's wrong that's better than a lot of what else is out there. You know what I'm saying? So like, I think he has some promise, but I'm sure he's going to let me down in some massive ways. So I hope for the best. I hope for the best. And I think that in terms of his political appeal, that I think is unique, and it's uniquely awesome because this guy who's very clearly appears working class, appears like your average Joe, a guy who is not elitist, is not out of touch. People genuinely want to have a beer with him, want to hang out with him. I think he's running a phenomenal campaign against Dr. Oz. I mean, we're talking about a Republican wave election, and every poll I've seen has Fetterman up, even if it's just by a little bit. And he's hammering Oz on Twitter, and I think he's a much, much better candidate than Dr. Oz. So, look, I'm optimistic, but I'm cautiously optimistic because I'm sure in many ways he's going to let us down. So,
yeah, I recently made a similar observation on our show about Fetterman, which is that he really is the only compelling Democratic candidate on the national stage right now. And what's so ironic about that is that the Democrats tried to frickin' squish him. They tried to, put Connor Lamb as their nominee, who certainly would have gotten destroyed by Dr. Oz, even as bad as Dr. Oz is. So the one candidate that the Democrats have that they actually, have some sort of appeal with the broad working class electorate, they didn't want anything to do with them until it was reached the point where it was obvious that they couldn't stop him. But that just tells you everything you need to know about the Democrats. It's like, oh, here's your one chance, the one
golden
race.
goose.
Yeah, and then you just fuck him. So I think that
He did support Bernie. I don't know if it was 2020 or 2016. And he also has previously described himself as a Democratic socialist, which is pretty based. Yeah. But the thing that's scary is when the Connor Lamb people were clearly losing and the Democratic establishment said, you know what, let's back down here and let Fetterman have it. That was a little concerning to me. It's like,
oh yeah, me too.
Because it's like, well, what did Fetterman say to these people that makes them think, you know what, it's fine. We'll let him have it.
I know.
So
I think
I think
a lot of it was the one, he's not going to take any kind of a stand against Israel's occupation of Palestine. He's really shitty on that. Like, full stop. He'll like say, I stand with Israel and they're a firm partner of America, and all. Like, he went full Andrew Yang, like, oh, I support apartheid kind of bullshit. So like, that's the massive L, and that's the one reason that it keeps me like from giving that like full-throated argument of the guy, because I'm like, that's just an unforgivable disagreement for me. But domestically, he's just so miles ahead of Dr. Oz, but even Connor Lamb, with the fact that we've talked about this all the time, $15 minimum wage. He's fucking bold about it, which I like. He's like, if you think a human being should toil and sweat for $7.25 an hour, vote for the other guy. Like, I like that kind of energy. Like, go fuck yourself if you think that should be allowed. Like, you know what I mean? Like that. If you think unions shouldn't have the right to exist, like, get the fuck away from me. Like, I don't want to talk to you. Like, that's the kind of energy that we need on the left, because it dispels these preconceived notions that people have that we're all weak and feeble and that we just cry and get offended about everything, which is one of the things that I think we need to. I mean, seriously, that's what Gavin and I, we record out of Middle America. That's what people think. That's why AOC can never win a national election. She just won't win because people think that the left is weak and feeble and babies. And like, while Gavin and I, we're as hardcore as anybody on things that the right would describe as identity politics, we also understand you have to be able to functionally communicate your message to an entire American electorate, and they want a tough person that's a diplomat, that's a statesman or a stateswoman, or whatever. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, credit to you guys for being honest and saying, look, I don't think AOC can win a national election. I think anybody who thinks she can is lying to themselves. I do think that. And I think there's a lot of that goes on the left. I think a lot of people on the left think, no, that's the future right there. And it's not. It's just not. She has gotten lost on the battlefield of the culture war in a way that doesn't appeal to a mass audience. I mean, I covered the story where she was
revolting by getting her nails done, Kyle. What are you talking about?
She was
class war.
Castigating other Democrats because they don't want to say Latinx. Now, look, on the one hand, I agree with her that that's not the reason why they're losing, right? Like, I agree that maybe people who are against the term Latinx put too much on it as if elections hinge on that. It doesn't fucking hinge on that. But the fact that you take the time to castigate somebody for not saying Latinx when it's like a fucking 3% issue, I forget the number, but it was less than 10% of Hispanics use Latinx. If I'm with the 95% of Hispanics, and would she call me out of touch or bigoted because I don't want to say Latinx? But I'm with 95% of them. You're with 5% of them. You're the one who's out of touch. You know what I'm saying? So like, but it's lost in these issues. And so I don't think she can win a national election. I think it's a shame. She had a lot of promise. She originally had a lot of promise. And I told this story before, I think, that when there was the revolt behind the scenes of Justice Democrats, when, some right-wing outlet dug up Jenks' old blogs where he said, like, obviously the genes of women are flawed because they don't want to have sex with me. He was being like self-deprecating when he said that shit, but people on the staff took it literally, like he was saying the genes of women are flawed, like they're less than us. And so there was like a mutiny on the staff. And at the time, AOC was on the board with myself and Cenk and Shoykot and maybe one or two others. And AOC was arguing for Cenk. AOC was like defending Cenk. And that is not the AOC that we learned later on through a fit.
Got pissed off when Rogan endorsed Bernie and they ran.
Exactly. That's not the same AOC. That's a different AOC. That's an AOC who's been in Washington a little too long, and an AOC who's a little too comfy with Democratic leadership, and an AOC who's lost her on the battlefield of the culture war. Now, again, I swear, I really, really hope that she can get her head out of her ass on this. Because if she does, and if she goes back to just being full-on economic populist, then she would have a chance in a national election. But I don't foresee that happening, and it's a shame.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with that. Unfortunate. And yeah, I share your disappointment, because it seemed at one point that she really could be like kind of heir to Bernie's movement, which, unfortunately he never really had an heir, never, quite picked an heir, which is, again, unfortunate, because now we're at the point where it's like, hopefully this fucking 85-year-old corpse of a man can run for a third time. Anyway, shout out to Blair Walsingham. Thank you so much for the $5. Where do you think respectful people who can actually belong in politics and be able to have respectful disagreements?
Look, that's a good question. And, I'm trying now to engage more than I have previously. I mean, I can't handle reading like Twitter comments and shit like that and YouTube comments and stuff. I try to engage people who I know are good faith actors. I know you guys are good faith actors. That's why I'm here and we're having this conversation. And, I really think that, and this is going to sound silly, but everybody bear with me here. I was watching the other day ESPN's First Take, You know, that show with Stephen A. Smith and whoever the fuck else he's arguing against all the time. And look, they're talking about sports. So the bar is lower when you're talking about sports versus talking about politics. But there's something about that show that I love. And it is people will get fucking angry. They'll yell at each other. They'll disagree. They'll clearly care a lot about the shit that they're saying. And they can come across as like, yo, homeboy might like throw some fists right now if like there's not a good response. But then at the end of it, you're very clear that like everybody's good. Like they're friends. Everything's fine. And then you could just move on. And I think that needs to come to politics. Now, don't get me wrong. There are some disagreements are so out of bounds that, of course, some things you're going to be like, whoa, I
don't want to sing Kumbaya with white supremacists.
Right. So if somebody's fucking pro-slavery or pro-white nationalism, it's like, okay, look, the conversation's done. We're done here, right? But everything that's in the reasonable realm of disagreement, like, yeah, let's yell about it. Let's disagree. But then at the end of the day, let's all go grab a beer and relax. And I think that's possible. But everybody's got to kind of get out of their feelings a little bit and turn down the temperature a little bit and just like sort of not be so petty and insecure. And I think
that's why I love doing the show with Gavin, because like the other day, Gavin and I, we went on like a 10-minute tangent where we were like, getting up in arms with each other about whether or not it was beneficial to have a gun in your house during a home invasion. And we were like at each other's throats, like we were like, okay, man, we have the whole rest of the show to do. Let's just, all right, let's go back to doing the show. And I think that's what you need to be able to do. You need to be able to just like trust that this person, in their ideal world is predicting what's best for society. And then so are you. And when you butt heads, you can yell at it, scream for 15 minutes, and then just like cool off, and then come back and do the Skip and Shannon as you mentioned.
Right. And that's the best content, and it's also substantive. Like you're actually arguing, that's a substantive debate right there. There's a real issue at the heart of that you guys are trying to get to the truth about. And that's what you want. And so that sells because the debate angle always sells, but then it's also substantive. So that's all you can ask for. And at the end of the day, if you guys say, hey, you're my brother, I love you, then that's up. That's how it should be. And so I just hope everybody can get to that place more, because clearly the online left has not been functioning in that sort of way for the longest time. The online left, it's like super vituperative, over the top, personal attacks, etc. And I hate that shit. That's why there's a number of times, you guys know, Vosh has taken shots at me over the years. And it's like, we took a little bit behind the scenes.
Some shots in at Vosh for you, Kyle. Don't worry.
I'm sure you guys have. Thank you very much. But like, that's when I show and when you talk to each other directly, everything's a lot more reasonable. Everything's a lot more. He's not going to say some shit that would be random potshot disrespectful to my face that he would have said in a video where he's just talking about me. And I just want everybody to get to that point where it's like, you could still talk to me like I'm in the room when you're doing the segment about me. You know what I'm saying? Because that's the approach I try to take. I try to say shit that I wouldn't say the shit. I'd say it if you're there and if you're there. Like, I'm not going to say some shit that's really over the top, where if you were in front of me, you'd want to beat my ass. You know what I'm saying? And so I think everybody can take that approach.
Do you agree? Do you like the fact that Vosh will say extremely negative things about you when you're not in the room, and then when you are talking to him, he doesn't say those things? Because I've heard Vosh go on some crazy rants against you and Crystal, but then when he actually talks to you, it's all kumbaya.
No, I like the fact that after those conversations, the weird personal attacks that go way too far decrease massively. Now, I'm sure he hasn't been perfect on that. I'm sure he's still taken some pot shots since I've left or whatever, but way, way, way less. Down 90, 95%. And that's because all of a sudden I'm humanized when I'm sitting there in front of you and we're talking about it, and I give you what is my reasonable response. Agree or disagree with me, I'm going to say some shit that is not fucking crazy when you ask me a question. And so you can digest it, respond to it, and then you realize later on, if you're talking about some shit I said, you know what, maybe I'll just DM Kyle and ask him what he meant by this shit. Or I'll ask him to come on the show and we can talk about this or that. And look, that's all you can ask for. That's all you can hope for. But unfortunately, look, if people prioritize the clicks and the monetization and all that shit, all that's out the window, and they're just going to be assholes because that'll sell. You know what I'm saying? But
right.
You gotta,
I'm kind of of two minds on that, because on one hand, I like the, very aggressive and vibrant debate that the space can offer. And personally, I don't really mind when substantive attacks are kind of played up in a performative way for the audience. Like, I think that can be entertaining. I think Vosh is a good example of someone that's done that. I think, Jimmy on the other side of the spectrum has also made, entertaining content out of that kind of idea. But I think it has to end when the conversation actually starts. So by what I mean by that is, like, it's cool to kind of get over the top and aggressive and stuff. But when it actually comes time to have a conversation, I think it's a good idea to, at that point, put that stuff aside and focus on the policy, focus on where you would agree, focus on a productive exchange of ideas. But, I also don't want to be a pearl clutcher or someone that's like, language policing people for being too aggressive and stuff, because that stuff can be entertaining and fun.
I agree with all that, but I come back to that one rule, which is just don't say some shit that you wouldn't say to my face, and vice versa. I won't say some shit that I won't say to your face. I'm all cool with you want to get angry, you want to get passionate, you want to raise your voice, you want to make the argument. That's all great. And that's, again, to go back to the first take example, they do that shit, like yelling. They're yelling at each other, right? But at the end of the day, it's nothing that they wouldn't say to their face. They are saying it to their face. And I try to do the same thing. There are times I get animated. There are times I get heated. But I try to not ever cross that line. And the other thing is, I also try to leave people's personal shit out of it. That I have a real, if we're talking about the politics and the policy all along, we could do that. But the second anybody steps into a realm where it's like not about the politics and the policy and it's more about casting personal aspersions or talking about somebody's private life, now you lost me. And now you're an asshole, Yeah.
That's fair. I do have another question, one more from Das Bosa Fleisch. Thank you so much, Das. Imagine you're an advisor to Nina Turner. What would your biggest advice be? That's an interesting question.
If I am an advisor to Nina Turner, my advice would be talk most about economics. Because she is honestly one of the most charismatic speakers I've ever seen in my life. She is phenomenal on the stump. She gives the most amazing speeches. And I think she has the ability to bring over people who wouldn't otherwise agree if she first and foremost puts an onus on economics. So unions, raising taxes on the rich, minimum wage, universal health care. I think, in other words, avoid the AOC trap. Because if you go down that AOC road, you'll never win a national election ever, And you could say, hey, maybe that's a little unfair. And maybe that actually is indicative of like white America not being ready for a strong black woman to really tell the whole truth. And I think that's fair. I think that's true. I think maybe that is the case. But at the same time, that's the path to victory. And then if you are, let's say Nina Turner in this theoretical world ends up winning the presidency as a result of that, well, then you could do your whole agenda, So that would be my advice.
Interesting. Yeah, I think that's a pretty interesting and pretty accurate take. Would you agree that Nina, this is my opinion, would you agree that when Nina was running for Congress both times, that it just seemed like it seemed like her heart wasn't quite in it to the same degree as when she was stumping for Bernie? Like, I felt like she was out there making such a passionate and good case for Bernie. And then when it came time to make the good and passionate case for herself, I just feel like she never quite had the expected amount of energy and like confidence, when that's what I primarily associated with her as far as like personality traits and stuff. Did you feel that at all, or was that just me?
Well, the second time that she ran, there was a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes, which was like unfair and basically them rigging it against her and pulling out all the stops against her. Like, she had people lined up who were supposed to endorse her and come campaign with her. And then basically Democratic leadership was able to squash that behind the scenes by throwing those candidates who were going to go in
the Justice Democrats.
Yeah, there were certain Justice Democrats, not all of them, certain ones that were like, yeah, I'm going to go like campaign.
Kyle, we're talking to AOC. Was it a big name?
No, it wasn't AOC. It wasn't AOC. It may. I don't remember who it was. It may have been Tlaib. It may have been Cory Bush.
Yeah.
What's that?
Oh, it wasn't. Didn't AOC endorse her like a day before the election?
Yeah. And by the way, even though that was incredibly pathetic and weak, that was still the best of all the people and what they did. Like, nobody else said shit. And it was, others were, I think, planning on going there, and basically the establishment pulled out all the stops and effectively made it clear to them, like, if you go campaign for Nina Turner, then the next time you're a re-election, we're going to fucking crush you. Everybody's going to endorse against you. Even like the Congressional Black Caucus, like, we're going to fuck you if you do that. And so, to the extent that maybe Nina wasn't in it as much, it was probably because she was dealing with so much shit behind the scenes in the second election. But look, I mean, I followed that thing from the beginning. I'm sure you guys did too. And just like with Bernie, they pulled out all the king's horses and all the king's men. I mean, they had Republican billionaire donors giving to Chantel Brown. Like, they were doing anything and everything to destroy her. And the first time around, she only lost by 3 points or some shit. The first time around, it was like 51 or 52% is what Chantel got. And like, they saw that this was a real race. And therefore, in the second round, they were like, oh, we're just going to embarrass her now because we can't. We want to crush all the hopes and dreams that she represents so that nobody even thinks about running again. And so, yeah, I mean,
do you think that kind of like damn, like, I don't know, it kind of, I don't know. I have a lot of respect for Nina Turner. When we saw her, as Gavin said, she was completely radiant. She moved mountains for Bernie Sanders when she was, stumping for him. But yeah, I just feel like, after her comments were used so much against her in the first race, that like one of my favorite things she ever said was, comparing voting to Joe Biden to like eating half a bowl of shit, right? And everybody on the left loved her for that because it was so honest and it was so like indicative of it because cards on the table, like I punched in for Biden, you know what I mean, and it felt like eating half a bowl of fucking shit, right? And that was so explicit, but I just feel like she learned the wrong lesson from that. Like all the Democrats rained on her parade and said, oh, you lost because you you were too much like this, that she almost tried to be like present as a leftist and as a more institutional safe bet. I don't know, do you think that was a bad move, or do you think that was just to try and court the district that she was running? I know there were a few neighborhoods that she was really trying to win over that people say wouldn't have been as interested in the rah Bernie Sanders, Nina Turner, but I always feel like authenticity works, right? If you look at a guy like, again, John Fetterman, and you say, is this the cardboard cutout of the guy that you're going to have run against Connor Lamb? Like people like me and Gavin and you, Kyle, we'd probably be like, fuck yeah, this is what we need. But if you're taking advice from normie Democratic advisors, or even like neo-progressive advisors, as I sometimes call the fucking people that have sold out and become a little mainstreamified over the years, they'll tell you need to be a little bit more Barack Obama era liberal.
Yeah, I actually think the conventional wisdom on this is correct, which is that comment was used against her effectively, because there are a lot of normie Democrats in her district. But see, the thing is, they lied about what she said. They didn't show the whole context. They just said, like, Nina Turner says voting for Biden is like eating a bowl of shit. They didn't show the whole shit of like, well, Biden's half a bowl of shit, Trump's a full bowl of shit, so what it is. They didn't show that whole thing. Now, even if they did show the whole thing, maybe it still would have worked against her, because there were a lot of normie Democrats in the district. But yeah, they're able to, and this is what's so difficult about being on the left, is that like, it's just harder for you to get elected because all the people with all the money are lined up against you, and they're going to nitpick everything you say to the high heavens, and they're going to, use it against you. And that's what happened with Nina. And that hit the right tone, where they ran a bunch of ads with showing that she said that, and then her numbers went down more and more. And so I think the conventional wisdom on that is largely correct, that let's say we lived in a hypothetical universe where Nina Turner is exactly like she is, but she never made those comments. It's possible she won. And that's a tough pill to swallow, but it is a lesson for the left. And the lesson is we have to be intelligent and we have to be strategic. And speaking your mind and being authentic is always great. But look, I'm a fucking political commentator. I'm a host. That's my job. That's your job. If you're a politician, you got a little bit more nuance and a little more strategic and a little more intelligent about how you say things and when you say it. And basically, winning needs to be the top of the list. And you have to do whatever you can to win, so that then we can implement our agenda. And unfortunately, I don't think that many leftists are really able to walk that line properly. I think a lot of people get lost on the battlefield. Great example is that Ryan Grimm article that just came out like a few weeks ago. I covered it on the show, which is, even in the wake of Roe versus Wade being overturned, all these so-called pro-choice groups in Washington, these institutional left groups, they can't address it, and they haven't addressed it. Why? Because they're internally fighting each other. They're having disagreements over, the patriarchy, and there's racism, and the bosses are tyrannical, and they don't give us enough time off, and they're literally having internal battles as the one shit they're supposed to be there for is going down. Like, right. Roe versus Wade has gone away. There are no more abortion rights, and they're fighting each other, and they can't coalesce and actually fight externally. And so that's the lack of strategy. And look, I mean, I don't want to get too conspiratorial here, but there is that CIA memo that was released where they explain in perfect terms how, like, yeah, this is how you divide and conquer.
Divide and conquer.
Yeah, right. You fight internally, and you bring up issues that are already settled, and you disagree over the specific language that's used. And this is what we're seeing over and over again. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah. Well, it's really one of the more frustrating parts of participating in electoralism as a leftist, I think, because you brought up something that's so true about the Nina Turner race, which is that unfortunately, a lot of normie Democratic voters, they don't actually have much of an appetite for seeing anti-establishment or hearing anti-establishment kind of rhetoric in the same way that, for example, Republican voters do. When Trump came onto the scene in 2016, he was rewarded by the voters for shitting all over Bush, for saying that the Iraq war was stupid, for saying that the current direction that the Republican establishment was going in was wrong, for calling out all of them. But on the other side, that's why Bernie couldn't do the same thing, is because he understood that most Democratic voters, they actually still like Obama. They still like the Democratic Party, and they don't want to see it shit on. And again, that's not me or you or Zach, but that is the majority of actual registered Democratic voters who, just from anecdotal experience, I can tell you, are a lot of older people, a lot of richer people, a lot of suburban people, and a lot of MSNBC listeners. They're not people that are watching Secular Talk and the Vanguard, right? So when they hear someone, shitting all over the legacy of Barack Obama or something, that actually turns them off, rather than what I react with when I hear that, which is, hell yeah, thank you for pointing out the obvious reality of this situation and advocating for something better. But again, it seems like liberals, it seems like Democratic Party voters, they still are very in love with the establishment of their party and of the figures of its past, like Obama. So if there's one thing I'm really jealous of the Republican voter base, it's that they actually want to hear their own side kind of destroyed and, suggested to have a new path forward.
Bernie's biggest failure was losing the only argument that mattered in the 2020 primary, which was electability. Because every poll shows that was the main thing it came down to, that when you asked voters, hey, here are the policies, whose policies do you agree with more? It was astonishing how high it was in favor of Bernie over Biden. But then when you asked the question, who Donald Trump? The answer was always Biden, and the media echoed that relentlessly. Just, it's Biden, it's Biden, it's Biden, it's Biden. And Bernie, I remember the night after Bernie got just walloped on Super Tuesday, and Biden picked up so many states, and this was the beginning of the huge comeback from Biden. They asked Bernie, do you think Biden can beat Trump? And Bernie said, yeah, I think so. And that was the moment where I lost hope, guys. That's the exact moment where I lost hope. I was melting down behind the scenes, because I was like, if you're given that political softball down the center of the plate, you can't give the answer that you need to give in order to win, then you're not really about putting your boot on the throat, and you're gonna lose. You don't have the fight. And I was in contact with Factor, who's Bernie's campaign manager, and I sent him a long list. Here are the arguments he can use moving forward to make the case that you have to pick me. I'm the only one who can beat Trump. Biden is Hillary Clinton. We ran this choice in the last election where the safe electable candidate was supposed to be Hillary, and guess what? She lost. There was a meme going around, Bernie would have won, and it's because I would have won. So now you got to vote for me. And then also with the pandemic hitting, you want to talk about something to bolster all of your arguments. You're the only one who's talking about giving everybody healthcare in the country. And then we have a pandemic hit where people are dying, and you couldn't effectively make the argument that you're a better choice than half-dead Joe Biden. Come the fuck on, son. Crazy. And so that's one of the things that I got so frustrated, because you were right there, man. Nobody had ever won the first 3 contests and then gone on to lose, and basically won the first 3 contests and then went on to lose. And that broke me. That made me feel like, come on, there's a problem with you here. This isn't just about the DNC anymore. This is about you don't have that killer instinct that you need. Yep. So, yeah.
I had the worst take ever after the Vanguard existed as a blog before we existed as a YouTube show. And the night of South Carolina, when it all came in that Joe Biden was going to win, I wrote this article calling it Joe Biden's Pyrrhic victory in South Carolina. And then on Super Tuesday, I was just coming down anyway, it was a devastating day for all of us. It was a really hard day.
One more question for you, Kyle, from the chat before we let you go. Thank you again so much for your time this morning. It's been awesome chat.
My pleasure, guys.
Thank you so much. Mike H, $5. Thank you so much, Mike. How the hell do you like golf and tennis more than football?
It's a good question. So when I was a kid, I kind of liked all sports. I think the first thing I ever wanted to be was a professional hockey player. Because when I was a kid, I watched a lot of hockey. I would literally record hockey games and then watch them over and over and over, Rangers games. And there was a period where it was football, but I feel like my football obsession wasn't that long. The only one I never was really obsessed with was baseball, which is kind of funny because that's supposed to be the most American. I guess football is the most American, but baseball's right up there with the most American. My dad was a golfer. He picked it up late in his life, and he used to take me out when I was a kid. I lived right next to a driving range, so it was a golf range right next to me. That was my first job ever, by the way. I was 14 years old. I got paid $5.15 an hour, I think it was. And so I'd be able to hit free balls. And I did that all the time. And then I worked as a caddy You carry the clubs for people at the golf club. I worked at a caddy at a number of different places. And I just sort of got obsessed with golf. And, Tiger came on the scene in 1996. In 1996, I was 8 years old, and I just got to see like the whole arc of his career. And so the greatest golfer arguably ever, doing his thing the same time I'm like coming into my own and being around golf all the time. I loved it. And so that's pretty much the main thing I do as, for leisure these days. And when I'm with Crystal has like, we live in the sticks, right? Like super duper duper rural. And I know I can't say that word, don't make fun of me. And rural. I used to say rural and people made fun of me. But anyway, she has like a lawn, like gigantic, like fucking gigantic, like 120 yards long. Damn. And so I was like, oh, young in my tummy. I put down a golf mat. I get all the old golf balls and I will hit shots all day on my days off. So, that's what I do. That's what I love.
Do you think this whole Saudi Arabian tournament thing is going to actually end up replacing the LIV or something?
Yes, I think the Saudi tour is eventually going to replace the PGA Tour because the PGA Tour can't compete. They're up against unlimited money and guaranteed contracts. You tell me how long the players are going to hold out. Hey, you could get $0 guaranteed, or you can get $100 million guaranteed. They're going to go for the game money. So it's just a matter of time. I mean, I feel terrible too because the PGA Tour, I mean, they have the same problems as other sports leagues, of course. And basically they're registered as a charity, and they give a lot to charity, but it's just a tax avoidance scheme, right? Like that's why they do it. But like, Saudi Arabia, way fucking worse. The worst crimes of the PGA Tour are nothing compared to committing a genocide right this second, which is what Saudi Arabia is doing. And so I think in the long run, they're going to drown out the PGA Tour, and basically professional golf is going to be owned by Saudi Arabia, which is disgusting.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy, huh? I mean, that's just wild that can happen.
Yeah, no, and by the way, that's a great, because, look, like tennis, for example. You think these tennis players, you get like 3 of the top 10 tennis players in the world, then pay all the guys who are mid-level pros. You think they wouldn't destroy professional tennis like that too? Of course, they could destroy any league because they have they make $1 billion a day. It is unlimited, the funds they
crazy.
So if they just
tennis
decide,
make bank too, though. They, I know Roger Federer makes like $100 million a year. It's like a stupid money.
But see, now here's the thing, though, and it's the same thing in golf too. Tiger's a billionaire, right? The best of the are super well off. If you're top 10 on PGA Tour or tennis player, you're really playing for the legacy. You're not playing for the money. You got all the money you need. But on the PGA Tour, if you're ranked number 97th in the world, you may have lost money this year. Because in the PGA Tour, if you miss a cut, you play 2 rounds. If the bottom half of the field, you don't play the weekend. You don't make a check. So you just made $0, and you had to pay for your hotel. You had to pay for your food. You had to pay for your flight. And so if you're ranked like 100th in the world, you might barely be scraping by. Especially for like the Mind of Golf, which is called the Korn Ferry Tour. Those guys are working class to their core. I mean, no doubt they're, flying economy and they're staying in shitty Motel 6s. And a lot of the times they're not making any money because they're missing the cut. And like, this is the problem with the model, is that like the workers were treated in very shitty, the people at the bottom. And so they're gonna flee. Now, on the other hand, though, Phil Mickelson was the one who was complaining the most. He had the least reason to complain. He was the number 2 golfer the entire generation to Tiger. This motherfucker was massively wealthy. He just blew it all gambling. So like, all of Phil Mickelson's concerns are total bullshit. But the concerns of people who are like, the bottom half of the pro players, their concerns are legit, and they're kind of struggling to get by. And that's why eventually Saudi's going to win, because they're just rolling out the red carpet for these guys. Imagine being one of those guys, $1 million guaranteed as your contract. You'd be like, oh, fuck yeah, I'll do that.
Honestly, man, there's a similar thing happening in the, and not necessarily with Saudi money, but it happens a lot in mixed martial arts, right? The UFC is a conglomerate, right? They massively exploit the bottom tier of their roster. They'll make them fight guys that they shouldn't have to fight on short notice. That'll definitely give them a loss on their record so that they can manipulate them again and then eventually cut them if they're not making them enough money. And there's, they're tyrannical when it comes to, unionization. Dana White is, basically a fascist when it comes to how he runs his business. All of these types of things. And so there's been a lot of talk over the years of like a union for these, fighters, to give them some sort of collective representation. But, the same story as I imagine has happened in golf. They just pay off the top guys, and then they'll say, "Go fuck yourself." Then you're number 97 in the world. Like, I'll find another guy in a college somewhere that's gonna work for free and just live on a dream, and the fact that maybe one day he'll get to drive against Tiger Woods on a fucking sunny day or whatever the fuck it is. So, is there any effort to unionize in golf or tennis?
I don't think so. It's very the conversation is very complicated because there's so many different factors at play. But one of the issues is they're all independent contractors, which means on the PGA Tour, which means they don't have guaranteed money coming in. So they choose their entire schedule. They choose where they want to play. And then, like I said, you miss the cut, you make no money. You make the cut, you make some money. And that independent contractor thing, again, is a little bit of a ruse because for the PGA Tour to remain a charity, they can't give guaranteed contracts. Well, now it's the inability to give guaranteed contracts, which is making them lose everybody. So they're kind of fucked. So, yeah, I don't know, man. I mean, there are issues with the tour, but again, the issues are the massive income inequality on the tour. It's not what Phil Mickelson was complaining about, which is, the top players don't make enough. Fuck out of here. Tiger Woods is a billionaire. He's a billionaire from playing golf. Yeah, he was a number one for over a decade, but he's a billionaire. What do you think he should make? 8 billion? Come on. What are we talking about here? The problem is the guys on the bottom of the tour.
Yeah.
Well, really appreciate you taking the time to chat with us today on the 4th of July, no less, Kyle. It's been fucking a massive, massive treat to have you on today. And Gavin, I don't know if you had any final questions, but I was going to let this man get the hell out of here.
Yeah, I was just going to say, once again, thank you so much, Kyle. Really, really enjoyed the conversation. Is there anything you wanted to say just before you head out as far as, promoting anything you might have coming up that you wanted to let our audience know about, or just any final words in general?
No, I don't. Not really. I mean, everybody could go subscribe on Secular Talk. Not that it matters because my sub number won't budge no matter what the fuck happens. So subscribe to keep me at 970 or 971 or whatever the fuck I am. I'd appreciate that. Everybody on Twitter too, if you want, you can follow. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you guys for having me on. I really appreciate it. I think you guys generally do a good job of sort of balancing those two important things that I talked about, which is tell the truth as I see it and just be honest, but also try to have solidarity for people who are in the movement. I think that's a difficult line to walk. I think not a lot of people do it well, but I do think you guys walk that line well. So I'll just say, keep up great work and thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks so much for coming on, Kyle.
Yeah,
My
really
pleasure.
appreciate that, Kyle. Really, really appreciate that. Thanks so much, man. And have a great rest of your 4th of July.
Thanks, guys. You too.
Yeah. Peace out, man. Yeah, great conversation with Kyle. Shout out to Kyle for coming on the Vanguard. I think we got to just about every question I had for the guy.
Yeah, I mean, that was insane. Obviously, we'd love to have him back on at any point. There were a few. I mean, that one of our most legendary interviews, as far as I'm concerned, on the short list for my, favorites that we've ever done.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought we had a good mix of, tougher questions near the beginning and then, some areas of agreement and disagreement broached. So just generally a good range of questions. Thanks everyone for submitting super chat questions. Sorry, we weren't able to get to every single one of them. But yeah, thank you to everyone that contributed today via super chat. We really, really appreciate that. Always great to have you guys as part of the discussion. Leninist Trotskyist. Anyway, thank you, Michael, for that. I know we got a couple more. Probably don't have time to go through everything. But yeah, really appreciate everyone for tuning into the interview today. I hope you guys enjoyed that conversation as much as Zach and I did. That's one we've been, looking forward to for a long time now. Big shout out to the patron community as well. We do like to start and end all of our live streams with a big shout out to our patrons. The patrons make this program possible. So if you do enjoy the show, if you do enjoy the content that Zach and I are creating here at the Vanguard, please consider hitting up that link in the description. It's going to be in the description of this video and all of our live stream and video content. That's patreon.com/the Vanguard channel. You can head over there to find out about some of the benefits we offer our patrons, one of which, of course, is your inclusion on the shout out screen, which we like to put up here, like I said, at the beginning and end of every single live stream. So, hit that up if you're a fan, hit that up if you enjoy the show, because like I said, the patrons make the show 100% possible. We would not be able to do it without you guys. So again, that's one way you can help support our show, help support independent media in general. But yeah, thank you everyone for tuning in. Please, please, please hit that like button if you haven't already. And if you're new to the channel, welcome. Please subscribe to the channel. We do interviews like this pretty regularly, as well as just, content between Zach and I giving our thoughts, analyzing the news, going over some good old lefty drama, stuff like that. So again, make sure to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and hit that like button too to help us beat that algorithm, which we talked a little bit about today. But yeah, did you have any final closing thoughts, Zach, to wrap up this interview?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I saw we got like a $50 super chat. I was going to say shout out to whoever that was. I saw that maybe you had some, health problems. I apologize for that. Gavin and I are not pro censorship in any capacity, though. That was what I was going to say. We don't care what you talk about. I've been waiting to respond to that one, but I think it disappeared. So I just wanted to give you a quick shout out. Appreciate the massive donation to the show. But yeah, that was just my response to that. Other than that, I know you said, Gavin, there's a few super chats we didn't get to. Much love to all of you. We appreciate all the donations. Shout out to the patrons, all that jazz. But housekeeping aside, it was an amazing show today. Super awesome. And yeah, we'll be back soon.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in today and for all the super chat donations. Really appreciate that. So yeah, thank you guys so much for tuning in. Make sure to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and we'll see you guys next time on the Vanguard.